Hi there, everyone. Today we are with a great singer and songwriter and guitar player, James Ingham. How are you
I
doing,
was
James?
I was wondering who you were talking about. Where is he? I'm fine. I'm
Don't
as
be
good
so
as can
modest.
be. I'm as good as can be expected. You know, it's been a
Yes.
difficult time for all of us, and
Mhm.
I'm very lucky that I took this up, the guitar thing, because I think a lot of people are going a bit nuttier than they already were,
It's a really
Cope,
great thing. It's a great thing to have.
coping with the whole thing. To have some music,
Yeah.
you've got a friend for life. If you've got a guitar, I can't remember who said that, but
You got a friend. I think it's James. Was it James Taylor?
yeah,
Friend.
yeah, it
Something.
could have
Or
been.
Carol King or something. There's a song.
somebody
I'm thinking of a
somebody
song.
that
Yeah.
somebody that knew what they were talking about. Yeah.
Right. Okay, James. So let's cut to the chase. So basically, James James and I we've known each other because we've moved in similar circles in London.
Mm.
And we're not talking about the Met Bar and nightclubs. We're talking about gigs and
Oh,
you know.
those days back at Tramp and Stringfellows with Samantha Fox. Oh, those were the
Yes,
days.
I remember
Yeah.
it well. But
Well,
yeah. So what to cut to the chase? Then I got a message on this video here, which I'm going to share now. I don't know, viewers at home. I don't know if you can see this. This was a video I put up about Danny Kirwan, and I did a phone interview, and then James got in touch with me, not knowing it was me, his friend, well, acquaintance, shall we say?
soon to be acquaintance.
Yes, and
I did not have
oh yes.
relations with that Ramon goose.
And he was not happy. So we're going to take it from there, and because I think that's the best place to start this story. So James, can you kind of pick it up from there?
Well, I wasn't deeply unhappy, but I don't know. It kind of bothered me a little bit. I think that there are plenty of inaccuracies in stories about music over the years, and they can be a bit nitpicky. People will say Rod Stewart played harmonica on My Boy Lollipop, and I'm kind of one of the people that goes, actually, he didn't. But this was a question of, I thought, well, this is quite interesting. Danny Kirwan, what went on in the 70s? Because it is all a bit murky. And I got through a couple of minutes of it, and no.
You weren't happy, were you?
It's being shared all over the place. And the thing that's great about Danny and the original Mac and all that great music from back then, Pentangle and people like that, young people are getting into it and wanting to find out. And you'll Google, or you tap in Danny Kirwan into a search engine on YouTube, and the fourth or fifth video down is your video. And people that want to find out what happened to him, you listen to music and it touches you deep. You can't help think, what happened to him? You read about
Yeah.
Nick Drake and you think, oh, that's really sad. I wish he'd made it. Or
So
other
James,
people. And the thing
what?
about
Yeah.
thing about this is that people are going to be listening to it and
Yeah.
thinking, oh, he was in a Spice Girls video. That's great. It's complete, total, and utter. Well, I can't really say. It's obvious. It's just that the family were looking after him and protecting him so well for the last few years of his life that nobody really knew. And I thought that was great, because it just was indicative of a caring group of people that were looking after him and keeping the press at bay, and keeping him as comfortable and happy, and with as much peace of mind as he could possibly have had in the last few years of his life.
So what would you say, just for the viewers at home? So because he obviously he did some solo albums, didn't he, after he left Fleetwood Mac?
Mm-hmm.
And where did you kind of come across? Did you meet him? Did
Well,
you?
yeah, no, I met him. I only met him once. I had become aware of where he was living, and Bob Brunning, who I subsequently got to know very well, ran his blues club for several years when he was starting to wind down activities, and he asked me to just take over the day-to-day running of the club and booking things and so on.
And Bob Brunning was the first bass player of Fleetwood Mac.
He was the original bass player with Fleetwood Mac, and he also had I was going to say a splinter group, but that's another story, isn't it? He had a group called Tramp, which was just a collective of friends. Bob was a school teacher, and he was taking his career as a teacher very seriously. So he would do albums and gigs on the side. You know, if he got asked to back up a blues man, he'd pull a sickie and not turn up for work on the Monday, and he'd go in and record 2 or 3 albums with a visiting blues artist. He said, you know, you go in there and we did 3 albums in one day. In those days, you just strapped your instruments on. Okay, let's go. Boom, boom, boom. So he did a project that involved Danny and Joanne Kelly. If you look at the list of people, again, I met her once, and God bless her. And Dave, who's still knocking around making great music and growing a really amazing beard. He was in that as well. And Mick Fleetwood, funnily enough, was in Tramp on drums.
Right.
The only thing I'm not entirely sure of is whether that took place after Danny had been fired from Fleetwood Mac. It was all around that time. And was Mick Fleetwood in the same room with Danny ever again? I kind of think not. I think that was about 1972. Mm-hmm. And so I'd become aware that Danny was in a hostel for the homeless in Covent Garden. It was near High Holborn.
So let me share this, guys, if I might.
It was a very draconian, Victorian, old, imposing Victorian building. It looked really scary. It's like something out of a horror film. And I'm not knocking St. Mungo's because they do great work, but if you just went and stood outside that building at the time, and I'd walk past it and go, Danny Kirwan's in there somewhere. So
this is, I don't know, guys, if you're going to see this at home, because I'm not a Zoom expert, but I'm sharing the photo of the care home that Danny was in now.
Yeah, I took that picture around that time when he was in there, and it does look, it's a lovely old building, and there's not many left. If you go up to London now, they're knocking the place to pieces. But at the time he was in there, so I was aware of the fact that he was in there. I'd become aware of the band in about the mid 80s. I don't know if you saw the show Fleetwood Mac at 21. You're probably younger than me, Ramon. You are younger than me. There was a show. I
don't know if I am.
Okay, there was a.
I'm in my mid 40s.
Well, yeah, I'm nearly 28 now. So I'm 51. Oh my God.
51. You look younger than me. You look 10 years younger than me.
I feel about 100. You know, it's probably because I've done so little that I look so young. But I think you've done more with your music than I have. But what I'm saying is that, yeah, I was about 18 and there was a show called Fleetwood Mac at 21, and we were all at a party, and I just thought, oh, I don't want to look at this. You know, you're trapped in someone's front room in New Malden, and I was picturing Stevie Nicks and Chiffon and Soft Focus and Californian rock. And the first 5 or 10 minutes of that program that I started looking at this really reluctantly, probably glugging on a bottle of hop or some horrible, it changed my life, because there was this guy, and he just seemed to be Bob Marley, John Lennon, you know, all these great people rolled into one. And that was Peter Green.
Yeah.
And there were loads of songs that I'd heard bits of over the years and thought, God, that's really good. What's that?
Yeah.
And in 5 minutes, I realized that all those little songs like Bits of Man of the World, you'd hear a snatch of that and think,
yeah,
that was amazing. Or, oh, well, what's that riff? You know, it's all him.
Yeah.
And they had a little bit at the end, if we just talk a little bit about Peter, because that's how I kind of got into it, where they'd filmed him from behind a bush. I don't know if you've seen that little clip of him in Richmond.
Yeah, where did he speak? Is he being interviewed?
They started out filming him covertly from behind a bush, and he's walking. He looked really bad. He had this huge duffel coat on, and he looked like he didn't look good.
Yeah.
And so he agreed to speak on camera. They snuck some pictures of him. He tried to cover his face, and it made for an even worse picture because he had the really long nails.
Yeah.
And it just I felt really uncomfortable looking at it.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, God, somebody's got to help this guy.
Yeah.
And I was 18, so I remember, wandering around Richmond and eventually finding this park, and stopping there on the other side of it, and bang on cue, the door opened, and this man emerged. And I'd been listening to nothing but Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac for about 6 months. I had my Walkman on, and there he was standing in the doorway in his, white shirt, and he's chain smoking, and he looked like someone who just heard some really terrible news. That was the look on his face every time I encountered him for a while. Just this kind of, and I realized if I go over there and say, oh, you're great, I could take what was probably a bad day and make it really bad. And it was one of those moments where you kind of grow up a bit and you think, this is a real person with real problems. The only person that can really help him is someone that knows him. It was Mitch Reynolds, I think, that turned up and said, look, come and live with me a few years later.
Mhm.
And I met Peter in 91 properly. I was doing a window display at the shop I worked in Wimbledon, and he walked past, and I thought, well, I can't just not,
Mhm.
I've got to say something. And you don't mind me rambling about this.
No, it's great because
There was,
yeah.
okay. I mean, what had happened was I'd met Honey Boy Edwards. I was trying to go and see as many bluesmen as possible at the time.
Mhm.
And, you know, Honey Boy was friends with Robert Johnson. Honey Boy Edwards was on the Blues Jam at Chess.
Yes.
Honey Boy.
So he played with Danny and Peter.
Yeah. So I was chatting to Honey Boy after this gig, and he said, "Yeah, you know, I was there in Chicago, Fleetwood Mac. I was doing a gig." I'll stop doing the impression because you probably don't understand what I'm saying. But he basically said he'd been doing a gig.
Great Jamaican accent.
It's great, isn't it? Bunny Wailer, I'm sorry. But yeah, he was basically saying somebody had rolled up at one of his gigs,
Mhm.
and said, I played with you in Chicago. I was in Fleetwood Mac. And this was a few weeks before. So this is 1991.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, I wonder who that could be. He said, yeah, man, he blowed some harp. He said he would. I said, did he say he was Peter Green? Yeah, that's right. So there's Peter Green outside my shop a few weeks later. And I thought, well, I've got something to ask him.
Yeah.
Did you play with Honey Boy Edwards? And he just went, no.
Mhm.
I just said, are you okay? No, not really. And I just said, are you having problems with your head? He said, I have been. I think I'm coming out of one right now. And I got the feeling that he was just going out and about.
What year was that? What year was that?
1991. So this was around the time that there was this egg and potato guy pretending to be Peter Green. And I imagine that's who probably turned up at Honey Boy's gig and pretended to have been in Fleetwood.
Right, okay.
And so I just gave Peter a big bear hug.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I met Danny the following year, I thought, I don't really want to bend his ear. And I was walking up from Covent Garden, having done some, music shopping, and I had some really nice guitar shops around there. And I just saw this guy sitting on a bench. It's him. He was instantly recognizable. It wasn't like someone that said that they'd been in a car crash in America and had plastics. So you knew exactly who it was. Long, lanky, blonde hair. But he looked good, funnily enough. Few days of stubble. And I just looked and I sort of said, Danny? Went, yeah. And there was a bench and I just went and sat with him. I said, are you all right? He goes, yeah, I'm all right, mate. Yeah, I'm a bit achy, a bit achy. Do you ever get like that, mate? You're sort of aching a little bit. And I just said, oh, look, it's funny, because I was speaking to a friend of yours not long ago. He said, oh, really? Who was that? I said, Peter. He said, what, from up the road there? I said, no, Peter Green. He just went, he's not my friend. Mm-hmm. Ooh, I was like, okay. Yeah. What about the other guy, Mick Fleetwood? Nah, and I won't tell you what he said, but he was very, I thought, well, I've got to get off this topic.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, I don't really want to talk to him for too long. But funnily enough, he was actually quite amenable to chat. And this was right near the hostel. It's just a bench.
Yeah.
It was if you left the hostel, I think he was just catching some sunlight maybe before the pub opened. There was a pub direct.
So this was like 93,
92.
92.
This was 92. And there was a pub called Oporto, which had been there for years. It's still there. I mean, obviously these days it's probably boarded up. But he would go in there. There's a clip on Vimeo now from 1989, 90. Carol Clark's Rock and Roll Table. Have you seen that?
No, sorry.
Oh, you've got to look this up. It was on YouTube for a while. And it's basically Carol Clark was, I think she was a Melody Maker journalist, and the Melody Maker offices were literally next door. Yeah. So they were opposite St. Mungo's. And she liked Danny. He'd just moved in there, I think. And they were just filming around a pub table with an old video camera.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah. What year?
Yes, that's right. That was about 89, 90.
I mean, he looks really good there, doesn't he?
That's what he looked like. That's what he looked like when I met him. Sort of instantly recognizable.
Lots of friends, like drinking friends, and
they were just guys that wanted to be rock stars. I mean, 2 or 3 of them have passed away, including Carol. It was the rock and roll lifestyle. They were very loved people, and they all looked after each other, and they loved each other, and they were friends. And so it's sad that most of the people in that clip are not there anymore. But Danny was somebody that I think that's what he used to say. I used to be in Fleetwood Mac. And so that's how he's I think a lot of people think it's very disrespectful of her to have done that in the video, but it was just a bit of fun. He's labeled as Danny, I used to be in Fleetwood Mac Kirwan, and he's not saying much. He's just having a pint.
Yeah,
so
it's an interesting video though. It's good to see,
Yeah. So when I met him, he was probably just waiting for the pubs to open, and I thought, well, I'll talk a little bit about. I'd been listening to, I think I've got it here. I was going through some of my old albums, just trying to find some sleeves, and of course it's the one I can't find. But I thought, well, I won't talk about Fleetwood Mac. It's clearly a sore point. And one thing I had been listening to was this. Can you see that?
Fantastic. Yeah. Yes.
Second chapter, and it starts with
Was that produced? Who was that produced by? Was it Mike Vernon? Was he involved with that?
I don't think Vernon's involved. I can actually read this. Clifford Davis. Or Clifford Adams was his real name.
He was the original manager of Fleetwood Mac.
He was the manager, and it's not a bad album. And I was saying to him, it sounds very much like the Waterboys or the Levelers.
Oh right, yeah.
Or early.
He did some reggae. He did some reggae stuff, didn't he? He did a reggae version of a Beatles.
He did Let It Be.
Let It Be, yeah, reggae version.
That was a bit. I'm not so keen on that, but this record's got a lot of fiddles and mandolins, and it's like Fairport Convention.
Right.
If you know the song "Walk a While," with Dave Swarbrick on vocals, it's very similar to that. There's a song called Ram Jam City.
Richard Thompson.
Yeah, those guys. So the opening track's called Ram Jam City, and I was complimenting him on that.
Yeah.
And the Ram Jam Club was in Brixton.
So mentally, can I just ask James? Mentally, where was he at when you met him in '93? Was he somebody that could get on stage and play guitar? Or had he played guitar for a long time? Do you think, or he hadn't touched the guitar for years?
I didn't ask about that. The thing was, I'd had a meeting Peter and finding that I really thought I should leave this guy alone. I kind of applied that to the Danny situation. I didn't talk to him for too long, and I walked away thinking, I probably could have sat there for an hour and he would have been all right with that.
Yeah.
But I complimented him on the solo records he'd made. Whether he could have got up and done it, no, I don't think so. Right. I think he looked all right, but of course, as you said, you look fine. I've had brainstem surgery in the last 18 months, so you can look at someone and think no, I'm all right, but I'm just saying, appearance-wise, you could say, yeah, he'd be all right, but he really wouldn't have been.
Right.
I'm sure he could probably still sing and play, maybe, but I doubt it. But having said that, when I met Peter, the idea that he'd ever pick up a guitar, even look at a guitar or touch one again, was just no way. And 5 years later, I'm standing in a field in Guildford with tears pouring down my face and looking at Peter playing the Stumble with his band and thinking and smiling. I'd never seen Peter smile before until he was on stage.
Well, I met him in about 2000 out in Denmark Street, and I chatted to him for 30 minutes. I was my first girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And, I went into Vintage and Rare Guitars, and they said, "Oh, Peter's just been in here." So I ran out, saw him in this people carrier, ran in front of the people carrier, stopped the car, and there was a driver. He had a driver, and then he got out, and we were on. He walked on the pavement, and I was just sitting there with my girlfriend, and I was very young at the time, and we were talking to him for 30 minutes, and he just seemed like a very sort of soft, very quiet person, quite short. I'm not tall. I'm 5'10". He was really short, and because I'd seen him as this giant legend, this Ulysses, and then he was. It's like that's my hero, man. But anyway, and he was. Everything about him was small,
You ever met Bill Wyman?
No.
Well, I'm just saying that's if you want short rock star that you were expecting to be 6 foot tall. Yeah. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
So but as you said, he was just very. I can't explain it. There was zero sort of, imagine like I've seen one of the Bee Gees in Denmark Street, just go through with his Bentley, and he's not going to stop and talk
Running down the street.
Yeah, he's not going to stop because he's famous, Whereas Peter was just like more like, he wasn't aware of his fame or that he was a total legend. He wasn't at all. Maybe he was aware of it, but because I was saying to him, you're my favorite guitarist, and he was like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah."
That was his pat response. Yeah, you could be wrong. There was a clip of him I saw recently from about '96 where they sat him in front of a clip of himself playing and singing "Oh Well," and he's looking at it like this. And I felt really uncomfortable because he's kind of going. He just said, "They've done something to that film. I was never that. I was never that thin. That couldn't be me. Couldn't be."
Well, it's like his old Les Paul. When they said, do you regret selling it to Gary Moore? And he's like, no, because the neck was too big. I didn't like it. And I hate Les Pauls. Like, I mean, of course, how can you not regret selling that?
When he was reunited with it, in the last year of his life, the first thing he said to Kirk Hammett was, "That's not my guitar."
Yeah.
Because the red had faded from the sunburst, and I think his mate Paul, who loved him and looked after him, and they were really good mates. He whispered to him. He said, "Hey, he's winding you up. He knows it's his." But no, that was his pat response. Was no, I'm just Clapton's replacement, and I kind of think that he almost overdid that humility thing.
What? So James, get back to Danny.
Danny, bless him. So yeah, I just said, look after yourself, and I listened to your music a lot, and I really did. I was listening to the music on the tube up to town that day, and listening to the Boston Tea Party and Like It This Way, and that, it's amazing,
incredible.
The thing I realized about Danny, I remember jamming with my mate Des, and we were jamming on Dragonfly, and he just said, "Yeah, that's one of Peter Green's best songs." And I said, "He's not even on it." "No, come on, that's Peter Green." I said, "No, that's Danny." Yeah. And it took me a while, a few months to train my ears to tell the difference.
Yeah.
And there really is
Boston Tea Party is brilliant for that, isn't it?
It's outstanding.
That's incredible.
Well, they played great together, but separately, they're very, very different. And in terms of the kind of songs that they wrote, very, very different. His sense of melody. And I think the kind of music that Danny was into was almost like 1920s torch song.
Yeah, and Django, he had a bit of Django in him as well.
Oh, he loved all of that. The jazz, the jazz stuff, but I think also the love songs. There's a song that came out, and it sounds like a demo, but it's just gorgeous, and it's only about a minute long. I think it was on the vaudeville years, called "Tell Me From the Start." Do you know it?
No, I don't know. I should.
It's one of Danny's songs, and it's really atypical. It's typical Danny, but it's not typical of what was when he recorded it, with probably Mick Fleetwood and John McVie helping him.
Yeah,
they probably thought, well, this isn't really going to fit on a Fleetwood Mac album, and it's just like one of these out. You can almost hear Al Bowley singing it. "Tell me from the start now, are you gonna leave me?" You look it up; it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
The chords and the kind of the sense of melody that he had, very different from Peter, really different.
I remember buying the vinyl when I was young, like 18 or something, to Then Play On, I think it was. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure, I think it was that album. It was Although the Sun is Shining.
Again, it's beautiful.
What an incredible song.
And the way the melody goes, I think the thing with him was he
modulates, doesn't it? It modulates.
He was a maestro in terms of melodic structure and his playing, which is just scary. I do think that he was inexperienced as a songwriter, and a lot of the lyrics, like Dragonfly is borrowed from a poem. It's not his lyric. I think he struggled with lyrics, and I feel Peter maybe could have, rather than just handing him half the album, he could have, if Mike Vernon had been producing Then Play On, and I really wish he had, I think he might have said, "Peter, could you help him with a couple of verses here? He's clearly this la 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 la. It's a really great tune, but it probably needs more words, and he's probably struggling with the lyrics." And yeah, that, although the sun is shining, it's gorgeous. Nice, simple words. And yeah, there's something that it doesn't sound like someone that's purely steeped in Chicago blues.
No,
he's clearly been listening to a lot of other music as well. You know?
So James, after you met him in '93,
it was late '92.
And then, what happened after that? What happened to him? Because this is the kind of the reason we're talking today, is to find out what really happened in his later times.
The next thing that happened was the following year. I always used to pick a copy of this up, and I've kept this. I don't know if you can see it, but this appeared as an ad. Are you seeing that?
Yeah. Mick Fleetwood looking for destitute guitarist. Wow. So he's actually put an ad. He put an ad in it.
So this is the week of October the 12th to the 18th, 1993. And most people that knew, anyone that had read Bob Brunning's biography of the band would have known that Danny was at St. Mungo's. Probably didn't need, but anyway, I called them up. There was a hotline, and I said, "He's here. This is where he is. Really be a bad idea to give this any publicity. The last thing he wants is for this to be some big news story, because he's quite fragile. If you could just get the word to Fleetwood and maybe he can help him out, blah, blah, blah." And a bunch of other well-meaning people, Martin Kelmans or Selmans, the guy that wrote the Peter Green book, I think he made a similar call. Jupiter John, Jack Boone, as he's known, he got in touch as well. And then the front page of the following week's Independent, this was literally on the front page the following week of the National Independent newspaper.
Wow. So he goes, he went his own way to oblivion. And I remember, I see, because I've seen that photo.
It's a famous photo now, and that is actually Danny Kirwan, isn't it? That's a real, oh god, yeah. Oh no, that's definitely him. And his beard had grown out in the year since I'd met him, and I remember kind of seeing that in W.H. Smith's and kind of going,
right.
Oh.
So this is 94. This is 94.
93, late 93. I'm not quite sure what happened, because my musical thing went off in another direction. I was playing a lot of palm wine African style stuff, and I kind of,
that's how come we know each other, isn't it? That's how come it
probably is, yeah. And I kind of I mean, I think there's a connection between the two, with the echoing, reverbing, lovely guitars and the melodies.
Yeah,
they're not dissimilar. I can hear a bit of Congolese rumba in a lot of Danny Kirwan and Peter Green's music at times. But yeah, the next thing I heard, Peter Green had made a comeback. There was the whole fraudulent egg and potato guy who was claiming to be Peter Green.
You want to just very quickly, in a nutshell, in 1 minute, just tell the viewers what that was all about?
Okay, I mean, I think this is pre-internet, so there was no information around, and it was possible for people like the chap that you encountered that spoke to someone who claimed to be Danny Kirwan. There was a fake Jeremy Spencer going around Wimbledon in the 80s. He tricked Bob Brunning into doing a gig with him, pretending to be Jeremy Spencer. And I said to Bob, "Are you sure you didn't know it was Jeremy? You must have known it wasn't him." He goes, No, I thought it was him. Jeremy Spencer's parents were in the audience at the Wimbledon Theatre, and this fake Jeremy Spencer gets on stage with Bob, and Bob was basically told, "You stop playing or you're under arrest." So he just went and got drunk in the pub across the road. And then there was this guy going around pretending to be Peter Green, and he tricked, I think, the guy from Queen, the drummer, whose name escapes me, Roger somebody. It's bound to be a Roger, isn't it? He duped about
Roger, the drummer from Queen.
Yeah.
Roger Taylor.
That's right. This guy managed to trick him. Yes, he shoots his scores.
My memory is...
Oh, mine's terrible. Yeah.
Old age.
Tell me about it, Alan. Boom, boom. No, he managed to trick a bunch of people, and he was close to getting a record deal, this guy, until Peter's lawyers put Peter's brother on the phone to him. And he eventually had to fess up. And I think he just enjoyed being Peter Green. There were a bunch of people impersonating Jeremy, bunch of people impersonating Peter. In those days, it was possible to get away with stuff like that. These days, it just really isn't. You can't trick people. Yeah. And it's out there. So I was a bit surprised about, your video and everything. And I feel sorry for the guy that got, if he was told by this guy that, he probably believed it. because at the time there really wasn't a lot going on. The next I heard about Danny was I know Bob Brunning told me. I took over the running of Bob's club, like I said.
I just want to say sorry about that. Sorry, guys, because I know you're going to hate me for interrupting James, and you're just going to say, "Shut up, Ramon."
Please interrupt me.
But Leon is a really good guy. You know, the guy that I did the interview with. He's a lovely chap. He's a real gentleman. So I'm going to be like Switzerland. I'm going to be neutral in this whole thing. So I'm just going to let James tell his story now.
Listen, as long as there's plenty of chocolate, you can be as Swiss as you like. And the cuckoo clock. What's that lovely Orson Welles line? But yeah, so Danny, I think Bob Brunning told me that Danny had been down to BB's one night. They'd arranged for him to come down to Bob's house in Colliers Wood and spend an evening with them. And I think that Danny was not in great shape, but it was just nice that they hooked up. I heard, I guess he ended up he'd gone looking for his ex-wife. And I think this was at some point in the early 80s. His mum lived in Brixton. Danny's mum lived in Brixton. She died. It's all a bit sketchy. I think he'd ended up living somewhere in Southend and had to sell all his possessions, including a guitar.
What year are we talking here?
So this, I guess, this is like going back to before I met him. He ended up, and I don't know why or how, but he ended up in St Mungo's in the West End of London. Mm-hmm. He would go and visit his mum in Brixton regularly. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't a complete basket case. He'd get on the transport and go and visit mum. Mum died. He ended up in a care centre, I believe, in Bermondsey. And this would be about 15 years ago. You know, the end, like 2010, thereabouts, 2011.
Right.
So that's where his address was. I guess he was living at this care centre. Kev Morris is the drummer for Dr. Feelgood, and I had a little chat with him because he's married to Claire. Mm-hmm. And again, you know, I'd feel a little uncomfortable because this is someone else's life. It's someone else's business. But
this is Danny's ex.
His ex-wife. Well, she used to go out with Peter Green. And then she ended up marrying Danny and they had a son together. I don't want to cross the line in terms of people's privacy, but absolutely, they were really good to Danny. They looked after him. And Kevin told me that Danny had broken his arm in a fall at the care centre and he couldn't remember how he'd done it and it wasn't healing properly. Mm-hmm. So his arm was broken. And that I heard that was one of, and then I think eventually they took him in and he lived with them. Claire and Kev looked after him in the last few years of his life. I believe he passed away at a London hospital, but again, I don't know. I think it was pneumonia, but quite honestly, it's none of my business really. It's very, very sad, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse because it could have been 20 years before on a Soho street in an alleyway somewhere. You know, in Martin Kelman's book. Have you got a copy of this?
No, I haven't. Do you want to show everybody?
Do you know what? This is some geezer scribbled in the front of it. I don't know who he was.
Yes. Somebody called Peter Green.
Something like that. But I was going to do some illustrations for this book, but they managed to get Peter to pose for a picture. This is from, I guess, 96, 97. Yeah. It's around the time of the Splinter Group launch. Right. But he was talking in his book about Danny and how they'd given him a party for his 50th birthday and he looked a lot better. He was being looked after. He interviewed Danny for his book, and Danny was just basically saying things that it was what he'd done was wrong and playing the blues was wrong and him and Peter shouldn't have done it. And I think Peter felt guilty about what happened to Danny because it was Mick Fleetwood's idea for Danny to join the band in the first place.
Right.
And Peter said that he did the invitation and everything, but he wasn't sure if Danny was ready. And I think that's pretty much I think if Danny had maybe had a year of doing gigs with his own band under his belt, if he had a little bit more experience, he could have then joined Fleetwood Mac, and it wouldn't have thrown him quite as badly as it did. He was so young, you know.
So for the record, you're saying that Danny was just based pretty much in London or maybe Southend.
Relating back to the interview where he's in America, and he went to America. In the interview he did for The Independent, he said that America terrifies me. If Mick Fleetwood wants to help me, he's going to have to come here. because I'm not going to America. It terrifies me. And I found out, I can't remember whose article I was reading about when they were in the States. And I think that somebody was brandishing a gun when they were staying in Chicago, and they were trapped in a hotel room, and it got quite heavy and there was gunfire, and Danny was shaking and crying and saying, please tell me this isn't happening. Please tell me this isn't happening. And I think that probably more than anything else probably messed him up. It would have scared the life out of him. He was living with his mum in a basement flat in Brixton, and to suddenly be in Chicago with gunfire. And I mean, some aspects of it would have been great fun. I'm sure Janis Joplin they had a really lovely night together. That's quite a legendary. She turned up in the dressing room one night and said, I'm having one of you guys. And it was Danny, apparently.
Really?
And they were all taking the mickey out of him the next day, and he was looking very sheepish. But I think America terrified him, and that's why. There's also the thing going around on the internet. I don't know if you've seen Peter's son Liam has been speaking to Rainer Langens about the Munich incident.
Yeah, yes. I mean,
and he's done a really good job, actually. And he'll be cross.
I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that.
He'll be cross with me if I don't mention him. All right, but basically, Rainer, who I believe is saying Danny wasn't there that night. Right. There is a school of thought that Clifford Davis, he said in that documentary about Peter that Danny and Peter both went to that party in Munich, and they both became very mentally ill afterwards as a result.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really, I think it's an oversimplification. I think Peter left the band because he was fed up with various things, and I don't think it had anything to do with that night. And Danny wasn't even there. I think the thing that did Danny was pressure and alcohol. That's my feeling.
Yeah. I mean, because I don't think he didn't come across like he was taking LSD or drugs. I think he just liked a good time down the pub too much.
I think alcohol is very underplayed as a dangerous drug, and I'm not going to get on my, I know from experience, and I think that's what happened to him. And at the end of his life, Kev told me that. I said, "Well, how is he? What's he look like?" Kevin Morris, and this is in 2012. I chatted to him. He said, "He's fine. He looks like one of the Dubliners now." And apparently Danny had grown this huge white beard. Yeah. And they just looked after him and made,
Because interestingly, I was working in Lewisham, a little job, a teaching gig I was doing there.
Yeah.
Music teaching. And it was in Lewisham, and I was looking for him. And I was on this is going back a long time now, but maybe 2010 or maybe
mm-hmm.
and I tracked him down, probably because of that interview Mick Fleetwood thing on the internet, and there were some message boards and stuff, and about him in the care home. And so I was trying to find the address of it, because I actually wanted to go there myself. I was like you, really into the band, and I just wanted to go meet him. And just I don't know why, but and in the end I couldn't. I was gonna. I think I emailed. I even emailed his ex. Drummer. I can't remember. But I didn't get any response, so I just left it at that.
I think it's a testament, and also to how protective they were of him. And actually, I'm quite pleased. I don't know that, because you want to say you're great and you're wonderful, and I really don't. I know Bob Brunning went to interview him for his book in 1988.
Right.
He rolled up at the St Mungo's, and he'd phoned in advance, and he'd arranged that he would meet Danny and interview him for his book. And Danny just came out of his room and was just patting his stomach, saying, I can't help you, Bob. Sorry, too much stress. I can't do it. Right. And went back into his room. And you probably would have encountered something like that, but worse.
You'd have to meet him down the pub after a few.
Possibly. But, if either of us were called upon to recount a 2-year period of our lives in, when we were 20, 21, we might not remember it well. We might not want to talk about it, and we might want to be looking forward and living in the present. And I think that's
people want to take him back to that traumatic period. And
I think I got that feeling when I mentioned Peter and I mentioned Mick, and I hope that no one should take that personally. He's like, he's not my friend. Peter felt bad. He felt really bad. He said, me and Mick are responsible for what happened to Danny.
Right.
And he wanted to own it. And I think, Mick kind of felt he wanted to do something A bit like the tribute concert to Peter. He wanted to do something for Peter, and it probably wasn't what Peter needed, which is why he couldn't turn up. He wasn't there, was he? Did you go to that?
What was that? Sorry, James.
The Peter Green gig last year at the Palladium.
No, you know what?
Did you have a spare couple of £1,000?
No,
or
you know what? I'm good friends with an amazing guitarist called Rick Vito, who used to play in Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, he's
well, I say good friend, but I'm friends with him.
Oh no, come on, he's great.
And he was going to borrow some of these amplifiers here that I've got. So initially, the plan was that I was going to be I was hoping I could be his amplifier technician, and bring the amps. But then he used an amp there, and I think he was the MD actually, Rick Vito. I think he was more or less the MD of the whole thing.
There are moments in that are just. I was so upset I couldn't get a ticket for that. I can't tell you. I'd waited 30 years to see Jeremy backed up by Mick, and I always thought it'll happen one day, and I'll be there. And I couldn't get a ticket for Love Nor Money.
I think from Rick Vito posted something on his Facebook. I think there's going to be a big cinema release in America of the whole show.
It's not the same. I wanted to be there,
Yeah.
And I had a feeling Jeremy would turn up, and he did. And he was I was in tears watching the clip of that. And the rest of it, I wouldn't really have minded missing. But what he did, and he wasn't sure if Mick Fleetwood's spoken about this, so I'm not revealing anything that Jeremy said to me, but Mick said he basically had to plead in the end, and Jeremy prayed, and the answer to the prayer came back, yes, you should do this. And he was kind of like, oh God, I suppose I'm gonna have to do it then. So he and his wife went along, and oh my goodness, what he did that night. 2 songs.
Yeah. And
Rick played beautifully. Bill Wyman was on the bass.
Yeah, I mean Rick I think held the whole thing together. Personally.
Yeah, well, Jeremy had his own guitarist that he wanted to do it with, and then
not with Jeremy. I mean the whole Rick was like the thing that glued it all together. I think
definitely they did a little Happy Birthday Peter Green clip a few years ago when Peter turned 70, and Rick's playing is just, I think along with Snowy White, it's the only playing I've heard that comes close to sounding like Peter did when he was really on it.
So In the Skies.
Yeah.
Because when I first heard that, I thought, oh, that's a beautiful Peter Green sound, and then a lot of people were telling me, no, that's Snowy White. So
again,
is it Snowy White, Peter Green?
Slightly urban myth. The fact of the matter is that yes, it is Peter playing. I spent an hour with PVK, Peter Vernon Kell. I was actually on a removals job with my mate Jason, and he said, "Oh, you might have heard of this guy. He's Peter Vernon Kell." I said, "Really?" And I just mentioned as we were leaving, having shifted a load of furniture around, I really love Peter Green. And he said, well, I want to talk to you then. And he loved Peter. And he told me all about the sessions and how Peter had wanted Snowy to play everything.
Yeah.
And Snowy kind of said, no, this is your album. So it's only on the track, I think there's only one track where Snowy takes the lead. And I think it's the second song in. It might be called Slabo Day or Slabo Day. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's a good song, that is.
The rest of it is a kind of composite.
Great album.
It's lovely. It sounds like Peter in a dream state. Peter's playing when he's in Fleetwood Mac is very much awake. It's daytime. And In the Skies is a lovely kind of ambient, it's a lovely soundscape that's created on that first track. And I think what happened was that Peter was he wasn't able to nail solos like he used to. If you listen to Fool No More, you can hear his fingers scraping along the board searching for notes. Once he's found
every night.
No, but once he's found where he is, you played great, man. Sorry.
That's me.
But once he's found where he is, then he attacks it and he plays well. But there's a lot of scraping around, and the first track In the Skies, if you listen, there's about 4 different guitar tracks. There's about 4 different guitar tracks. I think what he did was he recorded Peter playing and then just we'll put all these parts up. So if you listen to it, it's this echoing guitar. It's almost 4 or 5 Peters, because there isn't one part that would have nailed it. So there's some good stuff on there, but I don't think he was able to write anymore. They're old songs. The title track In the Skies, if you listen to Pete Bardens and Peter Green from 1966, there's an instrumental that they did called Soul Dressing.
Right.
And people listen to Soul Dressing and you can sing In the Skies over the top of it.
Really?
Peter's wife at the time, Jane, wrote the lyrics to In the Skies. She was a sort of born again Christian. So she wrote Seven Stars and, you know, those kind of things. It was a kind of a bit of a Christian album. He's singing about God, and it's not his lyrics, but the song itself is soul dressing. And Pete Barden's plays on that track, In the Skies. He's doing that lovely kind of organ, that kind of Hammondy sounding wow, wow. Yes, it's a nice sounding record.
James, tell me about this piece of art. I'm going to share this now. Now, if viewers, again, I'm new to Zoom, and if it doesn't show up, I'll put it on the main photo. I'll do a title for this video. But tell me about this beautiful piece of art you've done there.
Well, I was that's Danny, and I'd painted, because I used to paint a lot, and I just got out of the habit. I just kind of stopped about 94 or thereabouts. I just got out of the habit of doing it. But I'd painted 5 portraits of the guys from the original band as I imagined they would look now, because I didn't know. And having met Peter, I was able to. I did one of Pete. I can't find it anywhere. There's a sort of green. There's a green version of the one I did of Peter. Oh, that's really a green print. But yeah, I'd done this. I'd done this kind of thing of there's.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant.
That was the sketch I had on my wall, and I'd been working on that like the night before, or just the week before, and then there he was, and I thought,
yeah,
I've got to admit, while I was talking,
a lot of synchronicity happening.
Well, I was thinking, okay, so his hair goes a bit like that now. I was slightly studying him a bit, but I was able to get home and complete that picture nicely, having met him.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I just wanted to know what they looked like, and I had to imagine the one of Jeremy. Yeah. Completely, and I was pleased when I saw some pictures of him on the internet that I'd done a good job, and he quite liked what I'd done, and he sort of said, "Oh, you know, yeah, it's well executed," I think he said, which I took as a great compliment.
James, we're going to wrap this up now. I just want to say thanks a million for coming on. It's amazing to hear, you know, your account of Danny and Peter, and I think that the viewers are going to want you back, and maybe we can discuss some other subjects. You know, it could be that we discuss the Splinter Group. We could discuss Ale Fakatori, because we're both
Ali,
fans of his music. And you've actually met him, you know, so there's lots of things we can discuss. So I hope you're going to come back soon.
You play that stuff great, and I think Derek Gripper does an amazing job of keeping Ali's flame alive. And there's a lot of young people, including Ali's grandchildren, that are carrying the music on. So they can throw anything they like at Marley, but you can't kill the music, can you?
No.
And I think the Fleetwood Mac saga is rolling on in the press. I'm not remotely interested in what on earth they're going to be doing with themselves now, but I think that original band is really very special.
It is. So thanks once again, James, for coming on the show.
Bless you, and thank you for your music and all you're doing. I love listening to what you're doing. It puts me to shame. They look nice on the wall. I need to get them off the wall and play them a few times now that I listen to you.
You will.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll play together. When all this is over, we'll play together.
Absolutely. So God bless, James. Take care, and thanks.
Keep the faith.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Take care.